Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this webinar about our Executive MBA, and in particular with a focus on submitting a strong application and how you might want to fund your Executive MBA. These are questions we get asked a lot, so we thought it would be useful to do a session just to help you along with that process. There's a lot of information on our website. We have a fantastic application guide and some pages about funding as well, so I do encourage you to look at those, but hopefully we can also bring this to life in this session. My name's Kate Foreman. I'm Head of Executive Programme Development here at the Business School. So I work really closely and have worked really closely with the team who design and deliver our Executive MBA and launch this and have an oversight of all the different areas. So hopefully I can share with you a bit of experience from both King's and also other places that the team have got insights into Executive MBAs just to help you do that really strong application and think about this big decision for you. So just briefly, you'll have seen this on our website, but just to kind of revisit exactly who the Executive MBA is for, because that is relevant to the application process as well. Obviously, an Executive MBA is an MBA program, but it's very much designed for more senior leaders. It's part-time, which obviously fits quite well with people's busy lives, busy jobs. We find that format is very popular, but also more importantly, it's very much designed for the level that you'll be at. So as a guide, we say leaders and senior managers with at least 10 years of full-time relevant work experience. More is fine. If you're just slightly under that as well, please feel free to contact us. We're very much interested in the person as a whole, and it will be linked to kind of your level of responsibility and the role that you're in that we'll be looking for. So use that as a guide. Feel free to contact us if you'd like to, if you just want a little bit of extra personal advice on where you're at in your career. But generally, as you can tell, the idea is that you're going to be in a classroom with people who have very similar experience to you and also very different experience to you, and that's part of the appeal of the program. And so you'll be grappling in a sense with some of the similar challenges, and so actually the idea is that you'll be learning from each other as much as from the teachers in the class. We'd like you to be in a role with some level of leadership responsibility. You don't have to be running the whole company, but some level of leadership responsibility, which means that you've got experience of managing teams and projects, very much again so that you can contribute to the class and also get the most out of the program, because it's very much designed for people who have that level of responsibility and are looking to develop that. We're really interested in your motivations and ambitions. You don't have to want to take over the world completely, but we're also looking for people who do have an ambition to progress in some way or have an impact. And we'll talk on that a little bit in a moment, because that's something we like to see come through in the application. Likewise, any company, sector or industry, we actively encourage diversity in the classroom. It's actually genuinely more interesting for everyone if they're learning from people with different perspectives, and lots of people choose the program for that reason. So we're looking for any background, so don't be put off if you think, oh gosh, I'm maybe not in a traditional MBA type background. We're not worried about that. We've got people on the current programme from medical backgrounds, law, insurance, architecture, IT, financial services, consultancy, banking, all sorts of things, education. So you can tell we're really interested in that diversity and actively encourage that. And the same as well for any academic background. So you don't have to have studied business at an undergraduate level. The idea really of the programme is it will give you the business education you need. So business graduates are totally welcome, but equally if you did history or classics or modern languages or physics, we have all of those sorts of people joining the programme, and that's completely fine. And then just a little bit as well, I guess the more personal reflections. So who's the programme for? You do need to sort of fully understand and be committed to the idea of the part-time academic experience. So you're going to be coming onto campus for designated block weeks, which run over long weekends, but equally there's a level of study that you need to do in your own time. So, you need to be okay with that. Probably a few hours a week you'll be doing some study. So you need to be thinking about being ready for that, and actually does that fit with your life at the moment, and or can you work that out into your life at the moment so that you can do this fully. It runs over 2 years. We're pretty thoughtful with the way that we've built the programme, in the sense that we've tried to make it very suitable for busy professionals, but obviously there's a commitment there that you need to be ready to fulfill. Equally, we're looking for active participants in the classroom. there's a lot of discussion, there's a lot of casework, there's a lot of group work. So we're really looking for people that are going to be, participating. That's really how you get the benefit of the learning. And that's certainly a reflection from our classes, that they say, this is brilliant. I'm learning so much, not just from myself, but from everyone else in the classroom and the teacher as well. So people who are willing to share and contribute in the classroom and to contribute to that learning experience for everyone. And finally, we're looking for people who have, you don't have to have a 10-year plan necessarily, but we do want to encourage people to apply if you've got a sense of how that Executive MBA is going to contribute to your development. So the idea again that, there's a reason why you're taking the Executive MBA, and I'm sure there is. You'll be looking at this very seriously, but we'd like to understand why why for you believe that doing this degree at this time is going to help you further your career or your ambitions or your personal ambitions. So that's something just to be thoughtful about and to have a bit of a think about before you do application. We talked a little bit about the commitment to study. I think it's useful to just talk about that again. So as we've said, it's timetabled and independent learning, and I think it's really important that people just really understand what this involves, because we will ask you about this again in the application process, mainly because we want you to succeed on the programme. So it's our sort of duty to make sure that you really understand that you can commit to the programme. It's very fun, it's very enjoyable, but equally there's obviously a bit of hard work involved as well. So we've designed the schedule, as I said, for people who are busy. We know that people have work, family, social commitments. It runs over 21 months. In person is delivered in 10 intensive blocks. So you'll be coming onto campus between every 6 and 8 weeks, and they're sort of long weekends, so 4 or 5 days. And they include the weekends. So generally the blocks will run Friday to Monday, perhaps Friday to Tuesday, Thursday to Monday. And people find that really helpful, because actually you're not having to take lots and lots of time off work. Obviously, it has a little bit of an effect on your social life, but actually for a lot of people, I think they find it's a bit easier to free up the weekends. And also a reflection from one of our students, which I thought was really interesting, was, the nice thing about doing it at the weekend is you're not also trying to juggle a really busy inbox on those days. You can genuinely switch off and focus on the learning and not feel like you have to be kind of dipping back into work. So I think that's a really helpful reflection. You shouldn't need to take more than 25 working days out of the office across the programme, around about there. So it is quite manageable. If you think of that over 2 years, that makes it manageable with leave or maybe study leave negotiations with your employer. And we'll talk about that in a second as well. And then alongside in-person teaching, we have sort of about 10 hours of virtual learning for each module. It varies slightly. Some modules will have a little bit more online and a bit less in person, and vice versa, and that's really dictated by the topic. And we've done some fantastic learning design on that, just to make it really, really suitable for you. So we're not bringing you onto campus unless we think there's a benefit. Likewise, we'll be using technology-enabled learning and virtual learning wherever we think there's a benefit to that as well. So it gives you freedom. We've got a learning platform you can access 24/7, so you can really genuinely be doing a lot of that virtual learning at times that suit you. There'll be a few things to sort of dial in on, and particularly the executive coaching, which is an additional piece that you get to do. You have an executive coach that you'll work with, and you'll do that over Zoom or Teams, and you'll agree that with them at times that suit you around your job and their commitments. So relatively flexible, although the block weeks are fixed, and we do publish those dates into the offer pack when you get an offer, so that you can plan your live childcare, anything like that you might need to do. So moving on to the application, that was really just to kind of give you a bit of an overview of the kind of basis, I guess, of the programme, and all of that is relevant, I think, then to when you come to think about your application. So there's a number of things that you'll need to do as your application. There's a brilliant application guide on our website, so you can download that. It's a PDF document. It's readily available. So do look at the application pages on our business school website. We've got the link there, business/executive MBA. If you go to the application page, you'll be able to find the guide. It's nice and clear. So we really recommend you kind of download that, and it's got kind of step-by-step instructions as you're going through. So you do it through something called our application portal. And it's really just a kind of an online form with various screens that you'll need to fill in. So set of that is personal information, personal details, and contact details. The personal statement is a piece that you'll need to do. It's really important. It's around 500 words. And really what we want to do here is for you to help us understand you and your motivations. So we're interested in your role and your career path to date. So what you do, what your main work responsibilities are, the makeup maybe of your team, and then why you're interested in doing an MBA, and actually why you're looking at King's Executive MBA in particular, and what you're going to bring to the class and the community, but equally what you're expecting to get out of it. So that's your opportunity to really, in the application, to really give us a sense of you, what you do now, what you might want to do in the future, and why the Executive MBA is part of that journey for you. And so we really encourage you just to have a bit of a think about that and kind of share with us there information that you'd like to tell us. More, I guess, kind of factually, we're also going to ask you about your previous education. As a standard entry requirement, we say we'd like people to have a 2-1 in an undergraduate degree of any discipline, and in an equivalent qualification, you know, if you've studied in a different country. We say that because we want to make sure that if you're joining the programme, you have the capacity to engage with the academic rigour of the programme. So, you know, some experience in writing, reading at the level that a master's degree would be, and the Executive MBA is a master's degree. Having said that, we do consider students with less traditional academic backgrounds. So if you've got lots of relevant work experience, but maybe don't have a degree, or you did a different kind of professional qualification, we're open to discussing that, because as I said in earlier, for us really the main consideration is where you're at in your career and if this is the right program for you right now. And a lot of that is based on the kind of role you're in and the reason that you want to do the Executive MBA and kind of what your career ambitions are. So again, please contact us. We've got an email address at the end, executivemba@kcl.ac.uk. Please contact us if you think, you know, I don't actually have that 2-1. You maybe have a 2-2, or you perhaps don't have a traditional degree route in, but you'd like to know if we'd still consider you. We're very happy to have that chat with you. Likewise, come along to an event if you'd like to, and you can chat to the team there and also get a bit more of a taster of the programme while you're there. So don't let that put you off, but just as a guide, I think it's helpful for people to understand what we're looking for. When you do that, we do need to see proof of your previous education. Normally that's a degree certificate or transcripts, and most colleges and universities these days will issue that electronically for you. There's information in the application guide, and you can contact your previous university if you need to, and they'll be able to tell you how to get hold of that. But we will need to see that at a point during the application process. So it's worth just kind of starting the ball rolling on that. Again, there are any questions, feel free to contact us. People ask us about a language requirement. So fundamentally, the reason we would require good written and spoken English language is obviously the ability to participate fully in the programme. So you'll need to speak and write to a level degree to a level required to do well in the degree at master's levels, because you'll be engaging with perhaps academic journals and more advanced texts and concepts, and also you'll be writing essays and coursework and presentations and group work. So it is important that you can, you know, work with the English language to that level, obviously as well for class discussion with your classmates. Generally, if you've studied or worked in the UK or in English-speaking country for a period of time, that normally is enough. Sometimes if you're a non-British national and someone who might need a visa to study, we may in that instance need to ask you to provide evidence of additional language tests, and that's really to do with the fact that actually if you're needing a visa to study, so you can get a part-time work visa for this program if you need it, if you're coming in from another country, for instance. But again, that's really actually a requirement of that visa piece, as well as us wanting to make sure that you've got the right level. So my advice always with language requirements is, if in doubt, just drop us a line and we'll let you know, because it's much easier to advise you individually. But also, obviously, you can understand the reasons why that's something that we would check. And then the people often get asked about the GMAT, the GRE, or the executive assessment. So these are the standardised tests that most business schools will be asking for if you want to join, particularly a full-time MBA programme and also an executive MBA programme. So they're not required. We don't absolutely require you to have one. They are, however, very helpful to your application if you have them. So if you have one and you have a score, or you're taking it anyway, then, you know, we do really recommend that you send us your test scores. Again, because they're another piece of the jigsaw that helps us to understand your readiness to study at this. We particularly recommend the executive assessment at this level. It's designed for people who are looking at programs like executive MBAs. And so, you know, all of those are valid and we will consider them all equally. But if you're wondering which one to look at, I think as a tip for someone looking at an executive MBA, and many other schools will say the same, I think looking at the executive assessment is a good idea. It's just a slightly more compacted version of the standardized testing. Still very rigorous, but also looks a little bit more at the kind of leadership level competencies that would be tested. So we encourage you to look at that. People often ask us if we have a minimum test score. We don't. We look at you in the round. So we'll be looking at all of these factors when we consider you for the program. We don't just have a tick box of, minimum this, minimum this, minimum this. We're looking at you as a whole person, and we're interested in your motivations, your background, your ambitions, and your qualifications. And so it will be a consideration of those all together. So I'm afraid I can't give you a kind of tick box of minimum scores, because actually the program director will be looking at everything in the round and looking at you as a whole person. And if that's you're the right fit for the program and joining us there. So that's what happens. So you submit that application. If there's anything missing or any additional information that we need, we'll get back to you, and we'll work through that. We have a fantastic administrative manager, Laura, who will be the person most likely who will be in contact with you at that point if there's anything that we need to know. And then once we've got a complete application, it will be considered by the program director, and they will invite you in for a online interview. And we do interview all candidates. So we do this virtually. We know that that's much, much easier for busy people. So you'll do that through a Zoom or a Teams call. And really the interview is an opportunity to get to know you better, and for us to ask you anything in your application that we'd like to know more about. So again, we'll be interested in those elements that you've put in your personal statement, be interested in your role, what you're maybe finding challenging at work, where you think the executive MBA is going to help you. But also it's an opportunity for you to ask us questions as well. So hopefully you'll have been to an event through this year to learn a bit more about the programme. But equally, this is a great opportunity for you to meet the program director one-to-one, and to also ask and chat about anything that actually is particularly relevant for you in your decision making about programs and that you'd like to know from King's as well. We aim to respond really quickly after interview. We do try to keep things moving because we know you're very busy. So once we've done the interview, the program director and admissions colleagues will consider that piece of your application, and then at that point we're normally in a position to either make you an offer or ask for any additional information if we think we need to. So you should then hopefully receive an offer quite quickly if you've been successful. I guess hopefully at that point, then let's assume you've been made an offer. And so at this point, really, it'd be good. You should be thinking about funding anyway now, and I know many of you are, but actually at that point, obviously the funding question becomes quite a lot more relevant. So we're often asked kind of how people fund an executive MBA, and I'm sure you've been talking to people about this as well. Most students will use a combination of funds. It's fairly rare for people to only have one source of funding, perhaps for personal funding situations, but most people actually will use a combination of funding. And really there's three main types that you can see here. So largely people will be looking at personal funding, sponsorship and scholarship. And we can talk through a little bit of what those mean. So personal funding is the most common. And really, obviously, as it sounds, that's people using their own funds to pay for the programme. So the programme fees for the 2024 intake for the whole programme are £49,900. And lots of people do this through a combination of savings, perhaps a bonus if you're in an industry where that's something that happens, and salary payments. So definitely, start thinking about that just to help you with kind of planning for that. The fees are invoiced in 5 tranches. So on acceptance of the offer, you would pay us the deposit of £5,000, and then the remainder of the fees is paid in 4 instalments over the 2 years. Actually, I've just noticed a mistake on those slides. I apologise. So 2 payments in year 1 and 2 payments in year 2. And that's normally the October and the January. So actually, for many people, it is manageable to thinking about that as, instalments across those 2 years, and they can usually work out their personal finances to be able to do that. Equally, people also look at loan funding. So again, you've got to be pretty organised about just checking your eligibility for different types of loans. There are those available. The main 2 that we point to are Student Finance England, which UK-based nationals and students are often eligible for. But again, please check the eligibility. You'll need to look at that quite carefully just to make sure. We also have a connection to a company called Lendwise, which is a private lending company, but also doing really cool stuff, and they work with lots of the business schools that provide MBA type programs. There are also other providers as well, so do look at those. Again, we've got lots of information and some links on our website, so do have a look there and have a think about that. But for some people, sometimes a piece of loan funding or some loan funding is the way that they will manage to kind of bridge a gap perhaps in their finances. Do remember that you also need to factor in some costs for travel and accommodation if you need to. So that program fee that I mentioned covers all of the program, all the tuition, all the materials. There are 2 residential elements within the program, the first block and one in the second, and we do cover the accommodation when we take you away from London, so you don't need to factor that in. However, what you do need to factor in is travel to and from the block teaching in London, and if you're coming any distance, some people prefer to stay in London, particularly obviously if you're coming internationally, then you would need to do that anyway. But actually, even people who are based in the UK sometimes like to just stay over for a night in London if we've got a social activity or any evening teaching. So we can talk a bit more about that if anyone has any particular questions, but it's just something to think about, in that you would need to just factor that into any planning as well, particularly coming in and out of London to our central London campus. So just think about that when you're doing the planning for your finances. Another popular route is sponsorship. It is very unusual for companies these days to completely sponsor students. That's just been a change, the trend that we've seen over the last 5 to 10 to 15 years in kind of how learning and development works. But many companies will sponsor you in some way. So one thing we say is it's really, really worth talking to your employer for 2 reasons. One is that they're kind of support in kind is really, really important. They need to know that you're taking on this extra activity, and they could do lots of things to help support you with that. And we'll talk about that in a second, not just financially. However, many people also find that if they have a conversation with their employer and ask for some kind of financial sponsorship, partial sponsorship does happen. And we'll talk about that in a minute, because actually, I think you can put together usually a very good case to explain that what you're doing is beneficial not only for you as an individual, but for your company and team and organisation that you're working for. So definitely worth doing that, and we'll spend a little bit of time on that in the next couple of slides. And finally, scholarships. So we do have a scholarship fund here at King's that we use for our Executive MBA students, and that's because we really want to encourage that diverse classroom. It's really important to us to have a diversity of perspective and opinion in the classroom, and we know that different candidates will have very different personal circumstances, and potentially that will mean that they need different kind of funding arrangements, or partially need different funding arrangements. So we really do recognise that, and we want to encourage excellent candidates to join us at King's, because it makes the learning experience better for absolutely everyone and for yourself. So there is an application process for this. You would do that after you've been made an offer for the programme. So first of all, you need to apply for the programme, do your interview, and hopefully get made an offer to join the programme. And then at that point, you're eligible to apply for a scholarship. And we have a number of those, and I'll talk again about them again in a second, and the process I can talk you through. There is a 15% scholarship for graduates of King's degree programs. So if you did your undergraduate degree or another degree with King's, we're very happy to welcome back excellent candidates from our own community already. We have a couple of students on our current cohort who did that. So again, that's there for you as well. So you need to let us know during the application process, and then we'd work with you on that. So I said we'd talk a little bit more about sponsorship, so that's what we'll do now. So just some things to consider on sponsorship. When you're making a case to your employer, and we really recommend you talk to your line manager and others about this in your company, the things that they're going to be interested in is obviously, the return on investment for you and for them. The time commitment and any impact that you doing this program is going to have on the team, clients and organisation, and that's both positive and potentially negative. You need to think those through. Obviously, we think it's a very positive thing to do, but you might need to also just delay any fears they have about is there going to be any negative consequences here. The financial contribution you're looking for, and then a statement of commitment and conclusion, which we recommend you do. So I'll talk you through that in a second. And these slides have been prepared again by our fantastic admissions team. So thanks to Laura for these, because they're really, really helpful and based very much on our experience with candidates. So when you're talking to your employer, they're going to be interested in the return on investment. If they're going to make a in-kind or financial contribution to you doing this, they're going to be wanting to know, well, why? So with the way we would think about this is, there's obviously benefits across the board. Benefits to you, I hope, are quite clear. You're going to want to talk to your employer about your readiness to studying an MBA and why you want to do that. But also, reflect on your performance, maybe consider if there's any areas where actually you've mutually agreed with your employer that actually there's areas you'd like to develop. And I would wager that the program's going to help you do that. So it's really, if you can articulate for them that actually the program is going to be helping you to address some of that, I think that's really useful. And also, hopefully you've had a personal development conversation, professional development conversation with them where you've talked about what you'd like to do next and how you get there. And again, being able to kind of illustrate how this program is going to help you get there is really, really helpful. And I think also something to consider, in some ways it's quite easy to quantify and point out that some of the hard skills, as we'd say, it's not my favourite term, but some of the technical skills will come from the MBA. So for instance, you might know that you want to develop your financial and strategic thinking. And so it's quite easy to point to areas of an MBA where you can say, well, I will learn this. But also think about the soft skills that you'll develop. And that's the kind of interpersonal and leadership skills that may be slightly more intangible, but really, really important. And our program does a lot to help you develop those, particularly some of the core classes around leadership and people management. So, things that are going to support you to make tough decisions and lead challenging conversations. Those are the sorts of things that you can really point to again, and often will have come up in an appraisal or a feedback type conversation with your employer. And actually, they'll be really interested to hear how you'll do that. So benefits to you, I guess, as a person, but leading on to benefits for the organisation. I think also there are maybe some more direct benefits to your employer that you can really point to. So it's really good to think about the strategic context of your role and think about how engaging in particular modules in the programme might give you the ability to be more successful. So perhaps your business is going through quite a big change project and trying to really innovate. That's something that you can point to, and actually there are modules in the program that explicitly we can help you to illustrate that they're going to help you develop those skills. So if you've got anything like this where you'd like a bit more information on the program, there's a lot on the website, so I do encourage you to start there, but you can speak to our client relationship manager, and they would also be able to help you just point to those things. So quick conversation with them to explain why you're interested in the Executive MBA and what it is that potentially your business is really interested in at the moment. And I'm sure we can draw out from that some pieces of the program that actually will be particularly relevant for you. And then, I think broadly just thinking about the return on investment. So the program is a general broad management degree, and the reason for that is it's very holistic. So it will be giving you the ability to deliver real impact across areas. And we talk a bit about T-shaped professionals. So often most people coming to an MBA would have come up through perhaps a more technical specialism. You would have started your career potentially in a particular team, perhaps operations or marketing or finance, and then really to move to the more senior leadership positions at this point, you're going to have to become a bit more generalist. So you're going to need that understanding across the business. And so most people find themselves at this intersection on the T where you're starting to really try and broaden out your experience. So that's where an Executive MBA is really, really helpful. And I think, again, if you can articulate for your employers that change, and again, we can help you with that, then I think that's something that's really powerful. It's going to give you essentially, it's going to give you the ability to become a more impactful leader. So, and the way we like to think about impact and leadership at King's is both in terms of helping businesses be profitable. We know that's important. And equally for helping businesses to be impactful in positive ways and to have purpose. And we really believe that you can do both, and they don't need to cancel each other out. And that's one of the fundamentals that our program is built on, and something that businesses, I think, really need and know they really need to grapple with at the moment. So articulating that again for your business, I think, is really helpful. So we talked about impact on others, and it's really good as well to think about this, about how this might impact your team, your clients, and your organisation. And often, in some ways, this is posed by employers as a sort of worry about the negative. Well, if we let you go off and do this program and have some time to do it, what's it going to mean for everyone else? So you do need to think through how you're going to manage your time, so that the impact on others is minimal. And we've talked about the flexibility of the online learning, so you can be doing a lot of that in your own time. And equally, we've talked about the kind of design of the program to not impact on needing to take lots and lots of time out of the office. However, it does obviously have an impact. So it's really important that you have a conversation with your employer, because you're going to be doing something additional. And even if you manage to keep that out of work hours, obviously, there's going to be a commitment from you to do that. And it's useful if you've got, understanding and support of what that means, for very positive reasons, as we've talked about, but also just to make sure that you are able to manage all of that. So I think it's helpful to have thought this through, and then you're able to reassure your employer that actually you're going to work with them to mitigate any deadlines or risks that might be affected by this. I think have a plan before you go and talk to them about how you're going to be using your own time to complete your studies, as well as anything that you might need from them. So I think generally what we find is employers are really open to this conversation if you can show them that you're giving a bit and hopefully they're giving a bit as well, kind of mutual investment in this. So have a think about, does your company have any agreements around study days, and ask for study leave if that's appropriate. Sometimes you can use your holiday or do a more flexible working arrangement to accommodate any time that you need to come on campus. Likewise, some people might use unpaid leave occasionally. It's useful, I think, for employers, if you're making a formal request, certainly in a written way, that you also include the program schedule and an indication of what you're asking, because actually lots of Executive MBA programs will have very different schedules. So whilst you may know this program intimately and know the detail of what you're asking for, actually someone may have studied in a different place and might have done a different program. So perhaps don't assume, and just include the detail, because I think that really helps bring it to life for people. I think really important point, which I think actually we perhaps should have stressed, it was really helpful, is obviously everything you're learning you'll be able to use immediately. And because of the nature of the program being in blocks, you'll come in for a weekend and do some study around a topic. And literally, when you get back to the office the middle of that week afterwards, you're going to be able to use the learning. And I think people find that really powerful. And it's not till they start doing it that they realize, gosh, this is amazing. Something I learned at the weekend, I'm genuinely using in a conversation. Now I'm having a difficult conversation, or I'm using that framework that I looked at the weekend and I've been able to use it in my business. So really compelling point, and something to really stress for your employers that I think they find really, really powerful. And also think about, the benefits that stepping away from the office will have. So sometimes that's for you, gives you a bit of clarity, gives you a bit of time. I think we're all looking for time to do more strategic thinking. Literally, the physical approach of leaving the office and coming in to study on campus in a different environment, people find that really, really helpful. It really does genuinely sort of clear their mind and allow them to think a bit more expansively or strategically about things. But actually also, I think people will often say, it's a really good experience for their team, because you're not there all the time. And so actually, if you've been trying to develop your team and give people different responsibilities and give them space, you're actually doing that by stepping away a little bit, and it gives them space to develop. So have a think about that as well, because depending on the situation you're in, and maybe some of the development points you've been chatting about with your employers, this might be a really nice way to help develop your team at the same time. This is just a sample, so something we suggest people do, and you don't have to use this one, but equally this will be available on our guides on the website if you find it helpful, is to actually sort of, work out a financial contribution model and put that to your employer, because again, people find it much, much easier to respond to the kind of, detail, and it gives you a jumping off point for a conversation. So this is a sample from last year when the fee was just slightly less, but we can update this. So as a sample, what you can do is you can sort of start to lay out for them, this is the commitment. Maybe do this for yourself first, and then you might want to pull a piece of that to show your employer. But actually you can start to think about, how am I going to afford this, but also how am I going to make up that arrangement. And like, as we said, you can use that then as a jumping up point for working with your employer to maybe ask for support or sponsorship. It's worth having a conversation with learning development or human resources teams. It will vary in every company, and I think this is something that we want to stress, is take a little bit of time and maybe talk to colleagues about understanding how the process for this works in your company. Sometimes it's just a conversation with your line manager, and you'll have a local learning and development budget that they've got control over, that they can use to support you. Sometimes it's a bit more structured, and actually you'll need to go through a more centralized process. So really worth finding that out. Have a quick chat with HR or your boss or someone else who's done some study, and just find out how that works in your company, because that actually saves you quite a lot of time. But have a chat with them. So a lot of companies will have support for external education that's not done in-house, so something like a master's done at a university. So it's really worth finding that out. And worth telling you that employer contributions can take lots of different forms. So sometimes they'll do match funding. They'll say, well, if you're going to spend this much, we'll spend this much as well. Sometimes they'll do a percentage split. Sometimes companies will have salary sacrifice schemes. So essentially they pay, and then you sort of pay them back through a piece of your salary, a lot like we do with sort of some of the other arrangements that people might have. Or they might do tuition reimbursement, so you'll pay, but then you can almost charge some of it back, and we can provide you with receipts and that kind of thing if you need it, if that's the way it is. So have a think about that. Also, obviously think about whether you've got any bonus payment sacrifice schemes. You might need to factor in if you're going to take some unpaid leave, does that have a financial implication for you? But again, that might be a good way of doing it. But if you're putting it together a case for them, I think it's really helpful to have thought this through, because they may have questions, and then you can actually give them a sort of starting point. And then usually what we suggest is, finish your application to your potential sponsor with, a statement of why you want to do this and why you want their support. And actually, don't underestimate saying some of the obvious things. So, it's good to let them know that you're committed to them. If they support you, it's really good to let them know that, you're invested in that organization, and that you understand that they would be investing in you, and therefore would like some return on investment themselves. Ensure that you show them that you're taking responsibility for your development. Many companies want to see this. I think professional development these days is very much a mutual activity between a company and the individuals. So they're going to want to see that you're equally invested in different ways in this process, as well as them doing that with you. And often these are really positive conversations. We've said be prepared for any pushback. Hopefully you won't get any, but do have a think through, and just think, if they've got any questions, what are they going to be? And don't be afraid to be a bit persistent, because I think that's really helpful. And then finally, just to talk a little bit about scholarships. That was that third funding column that we talked about. We do, as we say, have scholarships that we offer from the business school. So these are funded by the business school, and as I said, these are to really help support excellent candidates joining us, and really that diversity in the classroom, because it's so powerful. So like I said, once you've been made an offer on the programme, you can make an application for a scholarship. There's one application, you just put in one. It's a form that we do, so you don't have to pick a scholarship to apply for and apply for multiple. You can definitely though indicate for us if you think you're particularly suitable for one. That's absolutely fine. Details of all these different categories are available on the website, and what we'll do is at this stage we'll be asking you to provide a bit of additional information on why you think you should be considered, and how you'll be a successful ambassador for King's College London. So we've had some really fantastic stories here. I'm thinking of some of our current class at the moment who were awarded some of the scholarships, and it's really helpful if you kind of paint a picture for us of why potentially in a certain area you're really particularly active, or you really particularly care, and perhaps other activities that you do outside of your work or within work that really support your application there. We have scholarships available of up to £25,000. It depends a little bit on the scholarship and the awards. Usually it's sort of 10 to 15% of the fees that we'll be awarding, but there is a range. And you can see here the categories that we have. And again, hopefully they just illustrate for you that, we really recognise that diversity in the classroom is really, really helpful. And so I'll complete there. We are going to have a bit of time for questions, and we've got a couple of my colleagues joining who are very close to this process, so I'll let them talk to you about those, and if you've got any specific questions you can definitely ask those, so please do ping them into chat and do that, and I'll pass you over to them in a moment. But we wish you luck. An Executive MBA is a fantastic programme. You're very much investing in your future, but we also really believe that it's a wider investment and really going to allow you to do lots of good both in your company and beyond. So if you've got any questions, or you'd like to arrange a one-to-one consultation, you can get in touch with the team at executivemba@kcl.ac.uk. Equally, on the business school website, kcl.ac.uk/business, you'll find details of the Executive MBA. Do have a good read through all the information, and I hope you'll find that useful. And I will pass over to my colleagues. Thank you.